episode of You Don't Know Squatch. I'm here with my co-host, Jim Myers, as always.
How's it going, Josh?
Not bad, not bad. What do we got going today?
Hey, we got a real treat today. This is an interview with a friend of mine who I've never actually physically met, but spoken to many times on the phone. And he currently lives up in Wyoming. And he has one of the most dramatic Bigfoot encounters I've ever heard. I think you guys are going to love hearing what happened to Jim almost 50 years ago.
Wow. All right. Well, this is pre-internet and pre-all suggestions, you know? So I can't wait to hear this one.
Yep. Well, let's go to the phone lines then.
Alrighty.
Your call will be answered in the order it was received.
Well, hey, You Don't Know Squatch fans, we got a real treat for you today. We have an interview with a fellow by the name of Jim who lives up in Gillette, Wyoming. And he called me about a year and a half ago out of the blue and wanted to tell me about an experience he'd had on some property he used to own down towards Cripple Creek. So, Jim, are you on the line with us?
Yes, sir.
And thank you for being with us. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I have to say, Jim's encounter is probably one of the most dramatic I've ever heard about. So
this is going to be an eyewitness.
This is an eyewitness, and believe me, eyewitness. So now this happened how long ago, Jim?
This was in August of 1974, right in the last part of August. So it was the last week. Just going on the last week of August, right in there.
Okay, 1974, and you had recently come back from Vietnam at that point, right?
Yeah, I'd been back home. Just a year.
A year. Okay.
Back home for a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So. Now this is out in the country. You own some land. How much land did you own back then?
I had 20 acres, and I was west of Cripple Creek and Victor in that area there.
Okay.
Oh, our neck of the woods.
Great.
Yeah, not too far from us.
Yeah, straight backside of Pikes Peak.
Yeah.
Looking at it on the west side and looking to the east front side range of the Sangre Cristo. Beautiful property.
Well, take us through the experience as you told me the first time, and I think our listeners are going to really enjoy this. But just walk us through what happened.
Well, it was back at that time. My brother and my wife and I at the time, we were down below on my folks' property, which is about 10 miles from me, lower down, and my property set up close to about. It's a little between 7,000 and 8,000 feet, probably about 7,200 actually, about where I sat on height-wise. And so we decided to run up to my property and wanted to check on some stuff anyway. And I had some deer kill that I was kind of curious about. And I was really kind of wondering what was going on with that in a factored way, really. So we got in my pickup and headed up to my property, and we finally had made ourselves up to the place there on top. And it was getting towards evening. It wasn't totally dark yet. There was still some daylight time left, and everybody knows how it starts getting in the mountains of Colorado in the last part of August. And plus, I was thinking about elk season in my mind too, and wanted to look things over. But we were up with about, I would say, a good. There was probably a good 2.5, maybe close to 3 hours yet before it got dark, and where it was starting to change. Just how later afternoons start getting at that time, and so we finally got up and got out of the truck, and we were looking some things over and standing there and staring off to the peaks and looking at the mountain ranges to Pikes Peak and the Sangre Cristos, and which is, to me, the beautifulest ranges there is. And so my wife wanted to look at some other stuff, and my brother and I were talking, and I said, well, I'm going to hike towards the backside of my property, which is facing south. And I always had a straight southerly wind that came up, and I had a rock peak that came up kind of high towards the backside of my property. It came up, kind of made it like kind of like a pyramid shape, the way the rock formations came up. And so they were doing whatever they were going to do back then. And so I said, well, I'm going to head on to the backside. And so I started taking my time, and I was walking back. And then when you got to the rock formation, the backside of my property, you had to come around one side of it to come out, because what it did on the backside, it had like stair step ledges, kind of like if anybody's been around any type mining where they have banks and one's up, the next one's down, then it kind of stair steps down. Well, I had about 3 ledges like that kind of just stair step one after the other down. But you had to be a little bit careful to come around the side to get to the first top ledge, and then you could actually just jump down to the next one. But still had to be a little bit careful. The ledges were about 2 foot, 3 foot wide, is about 3 foot at the most. And so as I was coming around the backside, I was watching myself, make sure I got my feet planted, and I moved on around where I could stand up, and then I could look straight south. Well, I was staring straight south on my property there, the canyon, and the way I would look, you can't see it. You'd be staring towards Canyon City, going that way through the canyon property, that area. But as I turned, I was first staring over at some things I talked about previous about like deer kill. Well, I'd seen where a deer had been killed, and I'd taken it to myself, well, I'm probably got a cat problem going on, because I had a lot of mountain lion in that area back then at that time. And so I was kind of focused on it. And then as I started to turn my sight to go look straight down my property on the backside, and from where I was standing and to my encounter, that all of a sudden I caught, as I was turning out of my peripheral vision on the right side, as I was turning, I'd caught movement out of my right peripheral vision, and I all of a sudden made a quick turn all the way around, and I froze at that moment. And I thought at first I had a bear, or a bear cub, or a younger bear, because the way it was knelt down, and it was in the ground, and there was like some deadfall that's very probably. And I was probably no more than 70 yards max, probably at that time. I'd say 75 is about it. And I just froze, because I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I go, my gosh, I got a daggum bear. I just took my eyesight, and I just kind of focused on it real quick. Then there was a quick kind of nod when the head kind of up, and then it caught me. That's not right. It don't. But then I spun back to my left side, actually turned my whole body around, and I cupped my hands around my mouth, and I yelled real loud as I could at the time back then. And I yelled for my brother and my wife, and I yelled their names, Bob and Karen, and I yelled really loud as I could yell it. And I did it a couple times, because I thought, well, I want them to see this bear, But in my mind, as I did that, my mind was still saying, that's not a bear, Jim. It's not registering right. And as I turned back around to take another look, well, to my surprise, I was right to what I had actually seen to myself that wasn't adding up, because that body figure had finally stood up now, and it was probably around a normal height that's still kind of a slight angle, 4 to 6 foot, probably about close right here as a normal human would range, as I'm looking down through the backside and along through the rocks of the open space. And I just thought, this is not a bear. I instantly said to myself again, this is not a bear, and I was totally stunned at what I was looking at. And then it registered to myself, and I'd heard stories on with Bigfoot and Native American Indian legends and everything, and I've heard other people talk. And I was just like all of a sudden going into total rewind in my mind. I was just staring. I can't believe this is happening. This is what I'm seeing.
And it was just the one that you saw at that point?
Yeah, that was just the one. It was the
Okay.
first one, but it was the thing that was interesting. The story. It was a younger one. It
Yeah.
was not a full grown adult, male or female. And I again turned back to my left. Now I'm standing straight up, looking straight south. So I'm twisting my body on that ledge I'm talking about, and I'm turning back to the left again as much as I can without tripping myself and falling off. And I cut my hands again and yelled again as loud as I could for my wife and my brother. And as I started to turn back to take another look, this time there was another entity, in which I'm going to say a person is like I like to call him. I'm not going to call him a monster. I'm not going to call him an being or whatever. I'm going to call him a person, because that's exactly, as I tell, this is what they were. And it came out to it, and it rushed back to the right side, to my right, and back towards where the timber was, where I had a lane of timber off to the right side and one off to the left side. And I just had that opening down between the two. And I had just a freeze moment, and then they went, and I was staring into the timber where I couldn't see anything where they went in that direction.
Could you tell, Jim, at that point, if the other one that came, was it an adult as far as you could see?
As far as I could tell, what I would put it as, I would say the height on it was much larger then. It got up into the range of around 7 foot, maybe even 8 foot, to where I was trying to spot check it with the rock formations that I had that was setting down. It was an upright next to it.
And was it a male or a female? Could you tell at the time?
I believe at that point in time, and again, we're at 70, 75 yards away, and from where it had come to that younger one, that was actually a female, because it was different from what took place, what's coming next.
Yeah, the best part.
And that was the moment in time where it's just unreal what took place next. And one more time, which really got me through this whole ordeal of doing this, of me yelling like this, that they had not really had taken off and hidden completely. Like you hear a lot of people where you have the stories where, I had 2 seconds, or I had 3 seconds with it, or we were behind a tree and it was behind a tree, or they were behind a rock and I was behind a rock, or, we just had a quick passing and that was it and there was no more to it. Well, no. That was not the story here. It was taking a longer time, and I think what was going on was confusion between them and myself too. They couldn't really, I don't think they could really believe what they encountered with me, and I wasn't encountering what I was seeing with them. And that was the big thing. And I again made one more turn, and I said, to heck with this. I'm going to try one more time, and if they're not coming or they can't hear me, oh well, I'm going to see what's going to happen here. So I turned, tried one more time, trying to yell to them, and I waited for a second, and a few more seconds again. I waited, and I was looking to the top ridge where you'd come around to my backside. I said, hey, you had to step around, drop down, but there was a little bit higher right there where you had to ease down to where I was standing. And I just shook my head like, well, I guess they don't hear me or what. And this time, as I turned, that's when I could not believe what I was encountering. I thought, oh, good Lord. this is not real. This is not real. At that time, in that moment, before I could move, here was this large, and I knew then when it got close to me up front, was the largest of the three, and I was putting it between 9 to 10 feet plus in height. And when it finally got to me, right up close and personal, it was a 10-foot plus Sasquatch person, or Bigfoot, or however you want to call it. And I call them people, persons to myself.
So you saw it walking up towards you.
Yes, and it was more than a walk. It was taking quite strides between its, and the strides were just like unreal. I mean, it was gathering ground on me.
So it was kind of a little bit aggressive?
Pardon?
It was a little bit aggressive?
Yes, it was. I mean, the way it was moving, because it was picking up quick. It was making its point to get to me as quick as possible before I could move. And
did you have any thought of running at that point, trying to get away?
Well, that was the point. Yeah, I did, because I looked at it. The only thing I can do is either hop down to the next ledge below me, but the only thing I could do then, I couldn't drop off the next one, because I had the way the rocks were. It was straight off below me where I was standing on the ledges. You know, they came up, and you could, if you landed wrong, you could put your leg between other rocks, either snap your leg or hurt yourself trying to drop down, because it was that's how I figured out the height-wise, because it was a good 10 foot up from where I'm standing to where I could get on the next set of rocks below me. And the other thing that I could do to my right is I could run along that ledge carefully, but then I had to get to a straight rock wall. Then I would have had to climb it to get up and get over it. And so then the only other opportunity was try to get back the way I came in and be careful. And it was going to be a slow process no matter what I did, because I didn't have the time span to actually move fast. I had to be careful in what I did without falling off on these small ledges I was standing on. And
so it's coming up the hill at you.
Pardon?
So it was coming up the hill towards you.
Exactly. It's coming straight on. I mean, it had its mindset, or you'd say full speed ahead. It was coming. And so as I finally just settled myself, as I turned back around, that's when he was on me within about 6 to 8 feet from me, from how quick he was moving. And I decided, well, there's nothing I can do here. I just sat on my rear end. I just slid straight down back against the rocks, and I just put my hind end on the rock ledge, and I would just sit with my legs up, back against the rocks. And next thing I know, this male Sasquatch is right up in my face, close and personal. Now, I don't know how tall I'm 5'9", and he came so close to me. That's when I just thought, oh my God, is he going to tear me limb from limb, or what's he going to do? But how close he got to my face would be like if you would take your thumb and put it on the tip of your nose and spread your hand open as far as you could, and with your little finger sticking out from your thumb and stretching your hand open as wide as you can. That's how close he got to my face with his face. Stuck it right in my face.
So like 6 or 8 inches from your face.
Exactly.
Wow.
From any one of you, to people's listening, and yourselves there's talking to me, you could just take your own hand and put your thumb up to your nose and spread your hand as wide as you can. And, well, that's how close he was to me. And we were staring eyeball to eyeball. And that was the most fascinating thing, because I could look into his eyes. It was so much in depth. It was like I was looking forever through his eyes. And they're massive black. It was around the outside of his eyes on the edge where the the upper lids would be, and the lower lids and everything, and into the eye set sockets part itself were just massive black. But as he was close to me, the pupil area, excuse me, the pupil area was actually kind of a dark smoke gray that was right in there in actuality for the coloration of it. But you wouldn't see that back there. It would just be solid black. But being that close, he had a dark smoke gray color that was dead center be the pupil part of his eye. And he blinked, and at first, well, so did I quite a few times. And I'm sitting there, and I thought for a minute he was going to get hostile because his upper lip, he began to wiggle his upper lip, and he got to stiffening it. And I thought, what's going to take place here? So, and I didn't know whether to say anything or what, or try to speak out, because I was just locked into what I was seeing, being that so close. And you would take the forehead, like on our foreheads, you can see how the skin lines, go across your forehead, or straight lines across and everything. And his forehead was a darker black, not complete real black, but it was a darker black. And he had really sharp lines going across the forehead that was inset across. And you would take the eyebrows where they went across like that. They were really thick. They were really heavy. They were dark. They were black. And they were heavy set around the eye socket, and the way the cheekbones would be. The bones were heavily thick right there and set. And his hair was reddish brown colored, not real dark and not too light, except for his chest area, where it was a lighter brown color on his chest, where you could actually see the chest coloration of his skin. And here's the thing I want to say to the people, that a lot of people under their witnesses, and they're describing this. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say this before, like I'm going to say it, is in trying to describe him on colorations, is the best way to put it is like people, any of us, it's been around the lakes or during the summertime, is what I'm saying, in swimming pools. When people are walking around, they got a nice tan. Well, you can look down at their feet, how their feet are dark on top with the tans, and then right on the bottom of their feet, you can see how light the skin color is, how white their skin is, the color of the tan. And their hands are the same way, where it's a darker color on top, and then the skin tone changes lighter on the palms of the hands and so forth like that. Well, that's exactly what I could see and how close I could do. I could see it so defined, and how his soles of his feet were, as I leaned a little bit to my left and looked straight down. The definition was unreal, and it was just to see that type of skin tone coloration like that. And like I said, his chest was the same way, was up on it. The lightness through the hair, through the reddish brown colored hair, you could see the lightness of his chest that was on it. And
so Jim, was he completely covered with hair? Did he have bare patches on his face, or?
His face was open, the cheek parts were, and it went darker, not completely black, but it was a lighter color, kind of a grayish tone again, back like the center pupils of the eyes, kind of what you call a dark smoke gray, and not completely black. But if you were standing back, you would get if you were at more of a distance, like it was at first, it was a total black looking color. But as it came in, you could see the grayish ash color that was along the cheek lines and stuff, in the face for the skin tone. And the lips were thicker. They were exactly like mine, only just a heavier lip, bottom and top, and exactly shaped like my lips, defined to a T as a human person. No difference at all. And that's why I call them persons. I'm not calling these as a being animal, or a nit, or an animal or something like that. These things, to everybody, these are humans. I'm going to tell you, this is about as human as you can get. And
was his nose more like ours, or more like a gorilla?
Yes, it was. It wasn't really widespread. His nose kind of came down narrow, and the craziest thing, where we were so close, I could actually look right up into his nasal passage, and it's just like a person you're looking at. Somebody, you can see sometimes where a person's nasal passage is wet, kind of a little bit damp, like maybe they might have a cold. His was the same way. He had sinus wetness, up through his nasal passage there. And his breath, when we were breathing and I was breathing together, it was really funny. He must have ate something that had been grass or something to the effect of it, because I've worked cattle and stuff up here and run around them. It's like being next to a cow chewing cud. They got that grass smell in their breath, and they've been eating. Well, that's exactly the way his breath smelled. It wasn't foul or anything else like that. It just like he had been eating some kind of grass textured something, whatever it was he had been eating. And
did he have an odor himself?
Yeah, did he smell?
No, that's the thing is, I listened to all these stories and the sightings, how they got this skunk smell, they say, or it's a rotten egg smell, and all these horrible smells. And at that time, I could smell and everything else, but I've lost my hearing, and it's went and not very good, and my smell and taste was okay at that time, but I didn't have any problems with smelling back at that time. But that's, after time it went on and I'd watch these other programs on Sasquatch, people talking about all these foul odors. I did not have any odors unless he had went and taken a bath, I guess, prior to our times of running into one another, or had groomed himself,
Well, and you're about as close as anybody's ever going to get to a Sasquatch, and you didn't smell anything.
No, that was it. It was just what I would call as what would be their normal smells. It wasn't anything putrid like that. I mean, he had a scent, but it was not no foul, dusty odor. Matter of fact, I've been up close and personal on elk when I'm hunting and had them been on me. And anybody that's done that, you can tell elk real quick because they're so heavily musk scented on elk.
Yeah, we've talked about bears before too, and bears also have a bad smell.
Right, and he, like I said, this must be his groom day or something, because even at the crown of his head, and it didn't come to a point like a lot of people try to say, like it comes up to a tipped cone shape, or a dome top potted head and pointed. His wasn't. His made a nice round part that, it came up, but it didn't come to a point like a lot of people said. It just went off. And his hair, like I said again, must have been his grooming day, because his reddish brown hair at the top was like he had taken his comb and parted his hair, on both sides. When I was younger and I did have long hair, after I got home, I let it grow, and just let it go long and parted it down the middle. Well, that's the way his hairline was parted down the center and ran down off along his neck side towards along his tops of his shoulders. And that's the way the hair was.
Could you see his ears at all?
You could detect them by the hair that was going up along the side. You couldn't see them real good because the way the hair flowed on that, I was staring at that, trying to look. And when I was angling my head and leaning kind of forward to him, trying to stare, and this is the craziest thing that we started doing. It's like all of a sudden we started having, I don't know if we was reading each other's mind or what was going on, since there was no talking, is I was staring so intently, and we're so close, and he's so close to me, staring at me. When I would turn my head or angle, he would do the same thing. He would stare at me such intent. And I'm trying to look, and I'm saying, well, gosh, you can see the ear, but you can't really define it like you can see mine here. And as I was staring, it was like he caught what I was trying to look at, and he was staring at my face, looking me over with such intent, like he's trying to figure out, what are you? And I'm like, what are you? It's kind of like both of us back and forth, just in a total scientific mode, staring each other over. And
what was going on as you guys were, as you two were staring at each other? Was anything happening between you?
No, there was nothing. And I was thinking about, at one point, I was going to raise my hand up, but I was really cautious about what I should do or not, because I don't know. I was thinking, if I might make the wrong move here, he might think I'm getting aggressive or something. And there's no way on this earth that I'm going to have a chance. I mean, this guy would tear me apart. I mean, it's the wrong move. And when he would move, everything was so defined on the muscles, and it was picked up. They would just move. I mean, they would just flex. Everything was so, like I said, the definition of all his muscles and everything moving was so amazing to look at. What was just, I couldn't believe, again, what I was staring at. And that's when I knew that this is not my imagination, and I haven't fallen off the cliff and hit my head and I'm dreaming all this stuff. This is 100% pure real.
And you go ahead, Josh. You had a question?
I was just wondering, like, how long did this encounter last for between you two? That close?
We stood there for this staring moment and moving back and forth. And when we first locked in and were so close like that stood there for a good 2 minutes or maybe 3 in a total staring contest. And then he moved back. He leaned backwards from me, and then that's when I actually leaned forward a little bit more where I could look his body over completely as I looked down, and I did, and that's when the hair and everything on the body, you could see the light colors, and which it wasn't exposed, you know. I mean, you could tell this is a male. But, I mean, everything, you know, it came up, it covered, and plus there was no breast for a female. It was a solid male person, and as I was looking, and as he stepped back, he actually leaned back. He took his right arm, because I'm sitting down on my butt, like I said, and my left shoulder is to his center chest, and so he reached back with his right arm, which was so massive, and it was just so huge in his hands. And he reached back to the tree limbs behind him, the pine trees, and he grabbed a branch and he pushed it up. And when he pushed it up, the tree limb was moving up, and you could see it. And that tree branch was not even cracking. No limbs were breaking, but he had literally pushed the thing straight up to where he could walk underneath it, go through right where he would probably duck a little bit. But a lot of people don't realize you're in the mountains unless you've been up a lot, which I always did, always in the mountains all the time. A lot of people don't realize that the bottom needles underneath a pine tree are real bright green. They're real light colored. On the top side, they're dark because the sun's hitting them all the time. And as he lifted that up, there came all these real light colored needles showing all over as he lifted it up. And he stood there, froze. And it was like, when he lifted it up, I thought, well, this is going to be it. He's going to leave, and this is all over with, this encounter. And I kind of moved a little bit on my rear end. I kind of slid a little bit more, and I angled myself. I turned my torso a little bit more where I could just stare at him a little bit more. And as I looked up, where I was looking down, he let go of the pine limb. He just let go of it and brought his arm down, and he turned and came in towards me again one more time. And I kind of moved my head back real quick because I just thought I didn't know what he was going to do. I really didn't. And he just came in for another close look, and he totally turned his whole head. Like I said, my left shoulder is facing the center of his chest. As he's looking at me, turned his whole head down towards his right shoulder at the top, leaned over at it, and looked right down the back side of my body as he came in to look, and just stared at me really for the most intense time, and then just slowly brought his body back up and turned his head back again, and we just stood there staring. And then I thought, I'm gonna try to talk. I think I got to do it. And about this time, through all this, what we're doing back and forth, something sensed him. I don't know what, and I knew what it was after a bit here, but he gave a look upward towards the rim back around where I was at, and he looked at me again, and he brought his right hand up on the rock ledge and paused again, took a deep breath, and exhaled and stared at me again and kind of glanced up one more time. And then that's when he turned and went right into the timber. And before he started to take off and walk away again, he actually had his whole backside to me at that point. And I'm looking at the back of his head, his whole back, down to his buttocks and down the whole back side of his legs. And he actually turned himself and stared at me one more time and just looked at me for an intent moment and just walked right into the timber and walked away from me.
Wow. Do you think the initial aggression towards you was maybe he was trying to protect his family?
I think exactly that's what it was when it came up on the point for me hollering. And then when that's what brought her out to get their child and to covet it. And in that moment to where she had broke loose on one of my moments where I turned back around and caught them moving back towards the timber. And then as I turned to yell again, that's like on that third time of that part, when I turned back, that's when I saw him coming, the male. But I think what it was, he was coming as an aggressive move. And that's why I was said when he first came up, the way the lip movement got tight, and he tightened his upper lip down really hard, and he was moving it, and he started to open his mouth, which I wish he would have, because I wanted to see what his teeth looked like. And but I think what caught him is because the way I froze, and I just got so intense staring him in the eyes, and that's when we got that close face to face and just began to stare at one another. And I could see the facial muscles in his face, how they got so tight when he looked at me, and the way the upper lip was. Well, it's just like if any of you or anybody else out there, you come out of a place and you're going to get in a fight, whether you're male or female, and all of a sudden you can read somebody's face and their lips tighten up, their cheeks tighten up, and well, it's going to happen. It's going to go to a throwdown here. And but it didn't take place, and thank God it didn't, because I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I mean, there's no way to everybody out, ladies and gentlemen, and young children's listening, and to y'all's listening, people, we don't have a chance. There's no way. There's no way to defend yourself against this. I mean,
were you wearing a gun?
Content.
By any chance?
Pardon?
Were you wearing a gun by any chance?
No, I had, and that was the crazy point, is I had left my .44 Magnum up in my pickup, and I left my camera up in my pickup.
Of course.
And I would always take that with me, no matter where I go. And I did want to take it down with me because I wanted to take pictures of a deer, the way that they were laying, and how they'd been killed. And that's what I wanted to take a look at.
Who knows what would have happened if you'd had a camera, if you'd picked it up and pointed it at him, what he would have done.
Well, he might have taken that as an aggressive move for me to move up real quick and probably try to take a camera to snap a picture, and it making its noises, and clicking and me winding it. He might have taken that, like I said, as an aggressive move, and I could be missing an arm or
or a head. Who knows?
Yeah.
Wow. So that's another one from here around here.
Yeah. So, Josh, just to go say that again. Josh.
I was saying that's another sighting from around here in this area.
So yes, it's we've had quite a few more, and then for waiting for you, Jim and Josh, you two, for you guys to call me up. The funniest thing was I was watching Monster Quest on television here a little while ago, and of all crazy things, they were talking about Bigfoot sightings of Cripple Creek and the Sangre de Cristo mountain range area, and what we're talking about today. And they had a rancher that they were interviewing, and this was back in the late 80s, early 90s, at his time. And then they showed on the screen, they flashed back to dates, and they had gotten down to 1975.
Huh.
Well, I had my sighting in 74. So people have had their sightings in that area down through Pike National Forest and to the Sangre de Cristo Range over there in the National Forest with Bigfoot sightings.
Wow,
So,
pretty steady too. Like,
Yeah. So,
yeah.
would you say, Jim, as you, I mean, it's amazing. It really is amazing that you sat there and you two looked at each other for that long. Would you say he's intelligent as he was looking at you?
There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, because the way he intently looked at me and with his eyes, the way he would move them, and because we would both do the same thing. We would break with our eyes and our eye contact, straight eye to eye. I would break, he would break, and we were just at all like looking each other over.
Huh.
And I'm taking a guess. I'm stepping out here, trying to think for him, which I can't. But I'm going to say that I think he was thinking like, "You look like me," you know. And
Yeah.
And I'm saying how much you look like me, and we're thinking that, and we're
Amazing.
It was just so intent between the two of us of trying to figure each other's body makeup chemistry was an amazing thing between us. And then I think that's what took any type of hostility that maybe it could have evolved didn't. Because
Right.
he, I think he finally sensed that I was not going to be no aggressor, which there was no way I could have anyway. But
And you told me one thing you didn't mention here. You told me how his mass size and his muscles, just describe how he looked below his head and his body.
Oh yeah, it would be like we've all seen the movies, bodybuilders, on TV and everything else, like the Charles Atlas guys, that it's all built up and so masculine and stuff like that. Well, that's the way he was. I mean, that's what I got to the point saying how well defined he was, and every time that he would move, and when he'd bring his arm up, and the muscles would just flex, and the definition inside the muscles, even though he had the hair on there, you could watch the definition being that close. You could just see the definition of the muscle, just the way it would move with the hair, with his hairline on the skin. It was just unreal.
Did you ever? Did you have any more like encounters in that area?
No, I didn't. But a year later, a guy that was living down on the lower ranch meadows on the way to Pike National Forest did, because he talked to my dad about it, and my dad had told him about my encounter, and he wanted to really know. Well, this one here he had seen. He was on his way to feed his horses, and he had some buckets of grain he had out there next to their place, and it was in the evening, getting towards dark, and it walked through, and he said his was 9 foot plus size Bigfoot that was walking real close to him, but from the barn side of where they lived and going towards the Pike National Forest. So I know it probably had to be more than likely the same family.
Right.
Just to put that in perspective a little bit, that's like a 1-story house.
That's like if he came in your house and stood up, his head would hit the ceiling.
Yeah, because on average, about 12 feet people have in their ceiling. I feel like this room's a little shorter, but God, I mean that's gigantic.
Yeah, it's a. I tell you what, you encounter something like that. I wish everybody could have the encounter I did, and
a lot of people wouldn't want it.
I know that sounds terrifying.
Yeah, and it is a total shock wave that'll go through your body. I mean, when you see it, and then you don't want to the thing is, you're telling yourself this isn't real, and you
Right.
know it's real because you're sitting there looking at it, and that's where I really get a bang out of these so-called scientists that like to sit on their duffs, on their pompous rear ends, and think they know everything, and there's no such thing as this. And that's why I never said anything for so long a time. I just kept quiet within my own family, and my wife and brother and my sister, and telling my folks about what had happened, and down on the ranch there. And until later on, I began to bump into people, and I would just listen. I wouldn't break in or jump into their conversation. I would just listen to people tell things, and I would say, well, they've seen what I've seen, and and bless them if they can. And at that point in time, who's going to believe me, right?
Yeah.
Out of service like I am, and I'd let my hair grow long back then, and I grew my beard. I had a great big black beard, and I looked like Jeremiah Johnson, and so
It's got to be an
that's when I had
ex-military
it on my
thing.
head.
It's like you're denied it while you're in there, so you just got to let it go. And
Well, it would be hard for anyone to believe this story just because you were face to face for minutes.
Well, as the house skeptic, I will say that this happened in '74. You said
1974.
And you recount it like it happened yesterday. Like, I imagine
I
if
have
something
not-
that imprinted on me, I would be able to recount like that too. I mean, like you do. I mean, that up close and personal, I could see that,
And this is like a Brandon moment for me. Every
Yeah.
season goes
Yeah.
Brandon. I mean, it's seared inside me.
Yeah, I
And
imagine.
it took me forever to sell my property down there in Colorado because of that factor of what happened to me. And every time that I would come down and go visit the folks, and I would go up to my place, I'd instantly go to the backside, and I would sit there and wait and hope and pray for another encounter.
That's
because
amazing.
I knew in my mind what I wanted to do this time, So
Well, it must have been initially terrifying as you thought he was going to come up and do something to you. But then when he didn't, I guess then your heart relaxed a little bit and you could study him a little bit closer.
exactly, and that's what I say is when on the body part, like I'm talking about, seeing how the difference on the skin with the feet, seeing how the coloration of the feet were, where you can see the white coloration of the feet from the top of the foot to the bottom of the foot. There's just a line separation, like I'm saying, people around a swimming pool. You can see how white their foot is on the bottom and how dark it is on top because they got a suntan. Well, you could see that on his feet, how the foot coloration was different. And even his hands, even though he worked with them, and even though there were hair on top of the hands there, but the hair on the hands are not real thick. It's a lighter hair is on there, and you can see the knuckles, the definition of the finger lines across the knuckles and up across those on each one of the fingers and right where the nails were. And his nails weren't, a lot of people talk about these big, horrible, like claw things. No, they were just exactly like my fingernails. Exactly, only darker. They weren't black. They were like a dark brown color, really, but not real deep, is what I would say. Because it was exactly just like my fingernails, only just a difference on the color.
Well, one other question that comes to mind, Jim, is when you look back on that, take a guess. What do you think he weighed?
I'm going to put an easy 800 pounds, and I'm not going to sway from it one bit. Easy. I mean, an easy 800 to come up, because I'm going off my years of hunting elk and dropping animals and just looking at them. And a person to be that size, and I know it's a good, him being at least 10 feet tall, right at that with no problem being that
Right.
height, and as massive as he was with his from the chest and from chest to back, the thickness, across his body mass, in the size of his biceps and down on the forearms coming down, and the way the thighs were and down to his calves. There's no doubt that it would be an easy 800 pounds.
Well, that's...
Jeez.
Well, listen, this is why, folks listening, and this is why this is one of the most incredible encounters I've ever heard of. That close for that long, with that much detail, and it was a peaceful encounter, and that the Sasquatch could have hurt Jim and didn't. Just studied him and walked away. That was
that's
1 in a million, 1 in a billion experience, Jim.
It's like you caught a Bigfoot on a picnic.
Yeah.
Like a whole family.
Yeah, it was. And I could, that's what was the greatest thing of it, that I know, whether you see a lot of these people, these TV shows and stuff out to kill Bigfoot and do this. And I'm going to say why. There's no reason this. And these, they're human beings. I'm going to say that to everybody out there that's going to be listening to the show. Folks, these are real people, and they're shy. That's why they never get found or get spotted. And a lot of people, well, look at all the hunters and seeing this and seeing that. I've known people that's been out elk hunting that's never seen an elk in their life and go every year. And it's so you explain that to me.
Well,
but
listen, I want to thank you again for calling me the very first time you did and telling me the story.
And thank you for sharing it with us and our audience. We really appreciate that.
You've
well,
given
I
a great.
I appreciate you all called me, and I would like sometime to go somewhere with some actually real professional people sometime if they ever go, with my knowledge, and just do things, because I've just suffered a severe heart attack here lately, but I'm getting through that. But time's catching up on me with me at 70 years of age. But the thought will never leave me. The moment will never leave me. The visions will never leave me. They're with me till the day I take my last breath.
I may have to drive up to Wyoming, and you and I will go out and see what we can find.
Yeah, I'll have to contact you, Jim, because I'll go down to Colorado, come down there sometime.
Okay,
I want to
that's
come up
fine.
See your place anyway.
Yeah,
so
I'll take you out any day you want to go out, and I'll show you some things. But
all right,
you're a gentleman, and I appreciate you sharing this with us. And I know it's going to be a great hit with our listeners.
Yeah, I really appreciate you letting me ask some questions too.
Well, thank you, Josh. I appreciate it. And more than welcome. And gosh, there's just so much stuff that's deep in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
That, to me, I could go on forever, but I know we got time to deal with here. But I appreciate so much for letting me share with you. And
thank you.
It's been all these years, almost 50 years ago, and
like it was yesterday.
Needs to be out.
That does need to be out, and people need to hear your story. So, well, thank you again, Jim, and we really, really appreciate your honesty and your willingness to share these details. And I look forward to seeing you when you come down to check out our store and museum.
All righty. Thank you. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Jim.
It was good talking to you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
All right, everybody. That was a great one. I mean, that was face-to-face with the Sasquatch.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Mr. Skeptic?
Like I told him, it was so... He recounted the event so clearly.
In so much detail.
Yeah, that
amazing.
I didn't really have many questions for him in this one.
I mean,
the smell,
Yeah, that was amazing. No smell, or nothing unpleasant. He said.
Yeah, and that's it's a little outside of what we normally hear.
That's right.
The other thing was he did mention the female. He couldn't tell, like, she didn't have breasts, and that was another thing that's been
or at least
said
he
a lot.
He didn't see them
because she was further
away.
She
was further away, but she took the young one and took it into the woods. To, I guess, get away from him, but
yeah, I wouldn't want to be in that situation.
No, I tell you what, having an encounter that close, I think I would have messed my pants and had to sit there in my own stench, having something like that walk right up to me,
and just
assuming it's going to kill. Yeah, charge.
You know?
I mean, march up to you, and he must have been thinking, I'm dead. There's nowhere I can go. There's nothing I can do.
Well, I'm so glad he survived the encounter and he shared a story with us. Well, guys, I mean, that's wrapping it up for this one. Thanks for sticking around for an extra long episode this time. And as always, look us up on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. We're on any place where you can find podcasts.
And up on our website, youdonttknowsquatch.com.
And if you're looking for the latest and coolest Bigfoot swag, be sure to go over to Jim's store. He's online now.
SasquatchOutpost.com. Shop now.
Oh, good deal. All right. Well, as we learned today, always remember,
You don't know Squatch.